Hello, welcome to my channel. I'm going to talk in this video about setting up packet radio, or APRS, which is an implementation of it, which has been around, packet radio, since the late 1980s. I used to use it the way of sending and receiving data packets using audio bursts like audio modem sounds you might know from the internet a long time ago, but via radio. And I've spent days messing around getting it working and reproducibly working, which wasn't easy, and I finally settled on using nixos. So this is a machine running nixos, and the advantage is that everything is fixed in a configuration file, so there's no guesswork as to what interface numbers are given to various interfaces. You'll see as I start to look at them. It's very important. So by editing a configuration file, nothing can change unless you want to change it. So I recommend nixos. I was using Ubuntu and Linux Mint before, and I found things were jumping around and configs kept getting lost or wrong. So now I'm doing it this way. Let me just look at my notes. Yeah, so this is freshly installed nixos that this machine is running. It's also for the recording, and sorry about the audio quality, but that's how it is. I've got a Digirig plugged in, which I've shown in some of my other videos. It's a US manufactured, which is rare these days, interface for audio input and output from a radio transceiver, and also serial control for the transmit push to talk, or PTT, on the transmit part of the transceiver. And all I need to do is to look at the device using lsusb. When it's plugged in, of course, you have to remember to plug it in. Here it is prepared, and these are the USB devices plugged into this Linux laptop. It's a ThinkPad, an old ThinkPad. No speed required. It's an i5 Series 4 X230 laptop. The important things here are this, which is the UART serial interface from USB to the transmitter PTT on the transceiver inside the Digirig. So remember that. And the other thing that's important is I have to think about it now because I've got a microphone plugged in. I think it's one of these two. Oh, I know which one it is. It's that one with the 0012, because I know this device ID. So it's this one. This is the Digirig audio, which is actually bidirectional audio input and output. It doesn't have two separate interfaces. And you have to remember 0D8C is the manufacturer and of the chip, and 0012 is the ID for the chip that's used in this Digirig. This is a newer Digirig, quite a recent one. The previous one used a CM108 chip, which was actually listed in here as CM108, and it has a different device ID. And part of my problem was being able to plug either of them into the machine and it's still working, and being able to detect either of them, which now works, but it wasn't easy to set up. So you need to remember that 0D8C0012 is the audio interface. So having done that, what did I do next? I need to look at my notes again. And if lsusb doesn't work, because on a freshly installed nixos installation, it's not actually installed yet, you can cheat. Instead of putting it in the config file, as you see I've done, where you would call it usbutils, you put that in and that gets installed when you rebuild the system. If you just want a quick look, you can actually just run it in the shell as a one-off using this nix shell command for usbutils. That doesn't install it, it just runs it, so you can have a quick look. And after you reboot the machine, it's gone away again. But I put it into USB as usbutils into the config file, and the config file for nixos that defines everything is called configuration.nix. That's this. I hope you can see all this. And it's it defines everything, which is really nice. All the hardware interfaces. You'll see in a moment what it looks like. It's a bit daunting if you're not used to having this kind of a declarative system for a computer. Most people are used to double-clicking on something and installing a software and saying yes. The problem is when you plug in and out hardware devices, then the device IDs jump around and software stops working, for me anyway. So what I actually did was I fresh installed the machine, and then I copied this configuration.nix as it was generated by the install, and just called it that nixos-backup so that I've got a backup, because if I mess it up I can go back. NixOS lets you roll back anyway. If you reboot the machine, it lists all of the different versions of the machine that have been built, and you can just click on or scroll down to the one you want and boot it, so you can roll back. But I still want to have my own copy of this because I've spent a lot of time on this. Anyway, so what I actually did on this machine was I just deleted the configuration file while it was running. It doesn't matter if you delete that while it's running, it carries on running. And of course I had a backup in case I wanted it back again. And then I copied the working configuration file from another machine. I have an identical old laptop which is working pretty much. And I copied the configuration file from that and pasted it onto this machine here, which I'm talking to you on now. And that is one of the advantages of nixOS, because you can do that. You can take a configuration file from one machine, paste it onto another machine, so to say, and it will work. And then you can have a complete working setup that's easily transferable from one machine to another. There are a few caveats, and if the hardware is very different, you'd have to regenerate the hardware config file. But anyway, so I've adapted on another machine this configuration to have udev rules built in and pipewire configuration for all of the hardware that's in the DigiRig. So what you do, we'll have a look at it now, using nano as the command line editor to edit this configuration.nix and make changes. I'm actually going to show it to you in the Kate editor because that's easier to look at. So when you want to edit it, you need to use nano on the command line because it has all the access rights, so it can actually write the file. If you just use Kate, it's not allowed to write to this file because it's a system file and it's so messy to sort out. It's easier just to use nano editor. But this is Kate that I use for viewing it because it's a bit easier to scroll around like this. So this is the original configuration.nix with my changes and extra information put into it and saved and then transferred from one machine to another one, and it works. And the changes, I'll just highlight what changes I've made. I've made sure that the the kernel that's running is an LTS kernel, so that's what this does. 6.6 just gives you the LTS version rather than the latest version of kernel version 6, just for stability reasons, because I really want stability. I want this to work because I'm fed up with things you plug it in, switch it on, and it doesn't work because something changed, which is why I'm using Nix with a fixed kernel, LTS long-term support version, and the version of the software and the OS is 25.11, which is the latest one. When the machine starts up, it actually reads in this hardware configuration.nix file that's been generated, which lists all the hardware in the machine. And you run it on each machine you're going to be running on, and then hopefully you can paste this configuration in and it will read the hardware for the particular machine it's running on and it'll work. Anyway, I'm going to have to somehow make this available to people to use because it took some time to get this right. These are udev rules, and if you're used to Linux, normally you just on the command line edit or create udev rules that are called at boot time. With nixOS you don't do that. Separately, you do put them inside this configuration file, and when you generate the system, then it takes these values, which means it's nice because you can change them easily here, and then you have to regenerate it or rebuild, as I'll show you in a moment, and then they are used. So remember the CP210X serial interface that was listed by the lsusb command? That is here, and what I've done is I have defined this. This is the identifier, the product and vendor or manufacturer for that chip need to be in here. It also has this mode 660, so that gives it certain access rights. It's given the group dial out, so it's used in the group called dial out, and you see we have to add the user for this machine into that group dial out, otherwise it won't be able to talk to the chip. And it's got a sim link, so it's linked with the name ttyDigiRig. I left out the I once and called it Digirig and nothing worked. It took me a while to find out what went wrong. So there's a sim link to this particular chip with these parameters, and it's called ttyDigiRig, which we'll use later in direwolf.conf to be able to talk to that device. Now for the audio, because I've got two different, what are they called? DigiRigs. Yeah. I've got two different ones. One is 2 or 3 years old and one is brand new. And they actually have different chips in them, which you only discover when you start trying to use them like this. So the one I just showed you with lsusb, you see it had 0012 as the product ID. That's the new one, which is actually currently plugged into this machine. But sometimes I want to plug in my old one. It has a different device ID, which is 013C. So these need to be in here. And you could add more of these if you had more devices to plug in. So this is given the name sound. And it's in the group called audio. And these are the hardware identifiers. And these are important. It's easy to get this wrong. What else have I done? These things I didn't need to change, probably. Let's just go through. The machine host name I've called this. Actually, I didn't call it that. Or maybe I did. Yeah, this is. All my computers have names, so I know which one I'm on when I'm looking at the command line, and I can talk about them. I do use ChatGPT or Claude quite a bit to help sort these things out, and then of course they can know what I'm talking about, which machine I'm on. These things are all just standard, put in there during the install of the Nix OS. These are standard things. Keyboard. Oh, I've put this in myself because alsa is used for the audio interface, and we'll see it will be setting the audio levels. And to make sure that when you reboot, the audio levels come back the same, then you set this persistence so that once you set something, it doesn't change. That's very useful. I think that wasn't the default in the default config file. This is where it starts getting messy. And here, I've had to play around a lot to get this to work. Finally, it does work. So it's using alsa to access the audio interface. And what you have to do is stop pipewire from grabbing the interface. When you plug in the Digirig, pipewire tends to grab audio interfaces and hog them, and it doesn't let them go again, even when pipewire is not being used, which was a problem I was having on other Linux distributions. And in NixOS, you can define things like this, where you tell it to ignore and not allow this, so that pipewire can't grab these devices when they're plugged in, so that they can be accessed directly instead. And that's a really luxurious thing to have. So, yeah, that was messy. The other thing is that the radio I'm using is a Yaesu FT818 for these tests. It has a fixed audio output level from the socket on the back. And it doesn't matter where you set the volume control on the radio, it's always a fixed, some sort of line level audio, which was actually way too loud, too high level for the Digirig input to be able to be used in the software that comes later. So we've had to put in this soft vol, is a soft volume control in software that you can turn down. You'll see that in a moment in alsamixer, where you can just reduce the gain of, or the volume of the received audio down to a reasonable level. So that I had to put in there. Capture level, yes. And then it appears as this name that can be used in other software. So that's a soft volume control, was important. That's something that I'll delete soon. I commented that because it nearly worked, but not quite. I've been through a lot of iterations of this, an awful lot. Here are the groups, and as I said, your user has to be added to the dial-out group, and that's not a default. In most Linux operating systems, you have to add that in, so I've added it here. My user is called user, so I don't forget the name, and that's useful. It also means you can access USB ports from a Chrome-based browser, so if you want to flash firmware on things, you need that anyway. Oh yeah, sudo times out after some seconds or minutes. I've changed it to 30 minutes. I was sick of typing my password in every time it asked me to. And that's about it, except for the system packages. So this is the software that's installed on the system, which you define in this line. Normally they come in a vertical column. I've just put them in a row. It takes up less space. And you can see some usual tools in here. Various things. Direwolf, that is the software TNC, terminal node controller, that is used for packet radio. In the 1980s and 90s we used hardware ones. I've just put a kit together today which I'll talk about in another video, to be able to do this in hardware the old-fashioned way. But at the moment I'm using software called Direwolf. These are necessary. This you'll see is necessary later on for converting protocols. Xastir, this is the program that does the packet radio transmission and reception. You'll see it's a GUI that lets you send and receive packets and APRS packets. So I'll be using that. These are things for video recording or shortcut for editing, which hopefully I won't need to do. So most of my videos are in one take, so sorry about the messiness when it goes wrong. I'm too lazy to edit them. So these are the packages you need extra to be able to do this packet radio thing. Let me just check that this is still recording, because I would hate it if it had stopped. No, it's still going. Good. So what to do next? Let me look at my notes again. So that was the config file, and I backed it up. What do you need to do next after having edited it and saved it using Nano, not using Kate, to exit from Nano after you've made the changes? You press Control X and then say yes and enter, or to exit and save, or you can say Control O to enter and then Control O to save and say yes, and then Control X to exit, one way around or the other. Use the editor of your choice, of course, but it has to have the access rights to the file, which is a system file. So I've done that. The next thing you do is this thing called rebuild switch, which will take a few seconds, but it then rebuilds the whole operating system based on the information in that configuration file. I'm not going to do it now because it's not very exciting to watch, and the more software you add new, the longer it takes, because it's actually installing it. Once it's all installed, it's quicker the next time. So you need to do this rebuild and switch. And actually I do a reboot as well. You could just log out and log in, but I find it cleaner to reboot. So the change of groups, because you've added the user to the dialect group, so that actually gets included, and then we're ready to go. So all the software is already installed because it was in the configuration file. So what I'm going to do first is called Direwolf, which is the software version of a TNC, and I'm going to, this is the command I'm going to use with an extra debug on the end. I'm trying to highlight it at the moment. So it calls Direwolf, and this is the configuration file, which we need to look at first before we can call it, and you have to generate that yourself. And then it's going to be with audio debugging with an interval of 5 seconds, so it will show the received audio levels from the radio through the DigiRig. So direwolf.conf, let's go and have a look at that. And this is much simpler. Again, I'm using Kate, and you can edit this with Kate because it's in the user's home directory. So this is the Direwolf configuration file called direwolf.conf. What do you need in there? You need your call sign, your amateur radio call sign, if you're doing this on an amateur radio band. I left it at no call for the purposes of testing. The transceiver is actually going to transmit and receive, but it's connected to a dummy load, so it won't radiate anywhere, and the power's turned down to minimum, so the signal will just radiate a couple of feet. Enough for me to be able to hear it in this room, but not much further. So we won't worry about the call sign. This is very important. This is the audio device that's been set up in that nixos config, and it was called DigiRig Capture Soft. So it tells Direwolf to look at this device for audio input and also for audio output and transmit. It's a bidirectional interface, the DigiRig. What else do we need to know? Speed, normal packet radio and APRS transmissions for amateur radio purposes on VHF and UHF are 1200 boards, so it's set to 1200. And for controlling the transmit PTT line of the radio using that serial port chip, that's CP2102, then this is the link for it, because it's seen by Linux/dev/tty USB 0 in this particular case. Actually, it's worth checking what your one might be in case it's different. It could be something different. Am I going to do that? No. You just do ls/that dev/tty with a star, and then it will show you. It might be ACM 0 on some systems. Mine always comes out as USB 0, and it's going to use the RTS protocol. That's ready to send. There are several different protocols that can be used, and RTS is the one that this system is using. And 60 delay, I think that's 60 milliseconds transmit delay, because it takes a while for the transmitter to start sending out a signal with audio on it before you send the packet. And the other important thing is that this direwolf program is going to expose a port, a TCP port, for its output for other devices to connect to. KISS stands for Keep It Simple, Stupid. And in the old days, there was a thing called a KISS TNC that was a simple terminal node controller. Anyway, this is emulated in software here, and it's available on port 8001 of the localhost, which is this machine. So that's the setup for direwolf. Now, let's go and have a look here. And what would I do first? Let me find here. This is the command to run direwolf, as I said, with the audio debugging. If you're very alert, you might notice that this has changed here because I had to unplug a USB microphone. Whoops, it was messing things up. Oh, how did that happen? Oh well. Anyway, so let's run this. And direwolf is now running, ready to accept client connections on port 8001. That comes later. And this, every 5 seconds, is the received audio level, which it's hearing, which is currently 0. It's plugged into a radio, so if I open a squelch on the radio, just let some white noise through. Turn down the volume a bit because you don't want to hear it. It doesn't affect the output line level on the socket at the back. You see, now we've got 29, which is quite a reasonable value to have. Started off at about 200 when I did this the first time, so that works. And let me show you how you would set the level using alsamixer with this command here. You enter alsamixer. I'm going to press F3 for playback devices, which also shows the input device for some reason. And this Digirig capture level, you have to move across till it turns red here. Now I can turn it up and down if I wanted to, and I'm turning it up to 50. That should have affected the numbers coming through here. Yes, now you see it's receiving a higher level of audio, which is a bit too high. So I'll turn this back down to 43 or whatever it was, and that is working. The next thing to do is to adjust the transmit audio level into the transmitter, and that is labeled as speaker. It's very hard to change that, and I don't want to recompile my Linux just to change that. And both of these appear on the playback tab, F3, even though this one is not a playback device, but that's just one of those things. And I've run out of energy to try and change it. So let's go back here, press Ctrl-C to exit. I don't like the white screen. Let's just make that go away. And the next thing to do is to set the transmit audio level. And here you'll see this is the command to set the transmit audio level by sending a test tone and then adjusting again with that mixer. So I've copied that. Let's paste it into here with Ctrl-Shift-V. You can hear the test tone coming out of another transceiver that's listening on the same frequency. So it's sending. It doesn't send forever, so it will stop at some point. And that's this one. If I click on it, yeah, it goes up and down. So you have to adjust this so that you have a signal that's not clipping, sounds clean, probably around about there, loud enough, and that seems to work quite nicely. So let's go here, Ctrl-C to go back to receive. So that was transmitting a test tone. It sounds okay. The receive audio level sounded okay. So I think that's looking good. If you press escape here, it'll save the settings. And I've also in the config.nix said let's keep all these settings permanent, so it shouldn't change. So what's the next thing to do? You remember the direwolf was listening on port 8001 for a connection, and the problem is that the program I'm going to use, which is called xastir, if that's how you pronounce it, the APRS transmitter receiver program, can't talk to TCP interfaces, so we need this converter that converts the TCP interface I mentioned into a serial link that looks like this, and then xastir can talk to it. So we have to just press enter, and that doesn't look right to me. Connection refused. Oh, here we go again. And the reason why the connection is refused is because direwolf's not running, because we exited it. So you have to have direwolf running. in order for this socat program to have something to connect to. Okay, actually if we look at that, it should say somewhere, yeah, client connected on port 8001, so that means it's connected and it's converting it into a serial link. You just leave this running. If you stop direwolf, then this will come back to the command prompt because this stops running when that port disappears. So the next thing to do, having got that working, is to start the program xastir. And the first thing it does when you start it is it sends out a packet, an APRS packet, so that worked. And of course, I've already got it configured. You would need to go in here and do configure station, put in the call sign for a station. Again, these are dummy call signs because I'm not transmitting onto an antenna, just a dummy load. You can put in your latitude and longitude. I spoof these for the moment, just for testing purposes. You can select a symbol to use so that when the packets appear, they have a little picture. I've chosen a train. You just go in here and choose whatever you think you like. And you can have a comment. I don't think I want to say it's Sunday. That was yesterday. No, a day before yesterday. You see how long I've been doing this. So my comment is that. That's the name of this particular laptop. So I know which one is transmitting. And here we can zoom just by doing that. There is this device that just sent out the packet, and it's nearer to France than it is to the UK according to the spoof coordinates. Anyway, that's that. We can do view. Oh no, wrong one. Well, yeah, incoming data also shows outgoing data. This is, yes, software that's kindly been written by somebody. So when you click incoming data, it means all data. Not to worry. And that is working. And when you first run this, you have to set up the interface. So you click interface and interface control. I've already got an interface here that I've set up. So if I go into properties, you would have to say add, and the type of interface you want to add is this serial KISS TNC. You choose that from the options and say add. I'm going to edit it by clicking properties and activate on startup, yes, allow transmitting, yes. I think these are all defaults. Full duplex was not default, so I've turned that on. But the important thing here is the TNC port. This here is the port address for the TNC, which has been created, I think, by that socat program that's running. Yes, here it is. So it's linked that localhost, meaning this machine, port 8001, to a name. It's linked it to this name. That is the name that you put in, where is it? Yeah, you put into here to make the link. So this is now linked via that socat program to direwolf that's then connected to the hardware interfaces. So I think that's everything. This is to do with propagation through a network. If it is connected to one later, everything else is at default. So I hit cancel because I haven't made any changes anyway and close this. But as you can see, it's working. And if I go to my other machine, hold on, if I can find it. I'm going to transmit a packet. So I just transmitted a packet, and you can see it's appeared up here. Let me turn up the volume on this radio. Close the squelch again. And then you'll hear it arriving. So, transmit. So there we are. I just transmitted another packet, and you can see that these received packets are appearing here. The other radio is on the other side of the room, sorry about that. And the station we've received is this one, which is a little red car, which I put here with spoofed GPS coordinates or map coordinates, no GPS here. So these are the two stations now at the two ends of the link. The one I'm talking to you from is this one, and the one on the other side of the room is that one. And every time it sends a packet, we see it here, and we see if this moves, it will have moved. You can also trace this. If you right click on it, you can say you want to track it, and it will track. If I want to send a packet manually, then you just hit transmit now. So interface and then transmit now. And it just transmitted, and it's recorded here, the fact that it transmitted and the coordinates it transmitted and the text. And yeah, that's without Sunday now. X230B is the other old ThinkPad laptop, which is on the other side of the room with another radio plugged in. So is that everything I wanted to say? It's a long enough video anyway. We set the levels. Or if you don't want the audio debugging, you can run direwolf with this command only. Let's just try that. So Control C, and then let's stop direwolf with Control C and do Control Shift V to run that. So now there's no audio debugging, and you'll just see the messages appearing here. And of course I have to rerun socat because it's exited because that server disappeared, so I know go like that. Now it's running again, and this program won't have noticed. Ignore these errors. I mean, it's trivial stuff. I haven't bothered to fix it. I could, I suppose, but that's cosmetic. So hopefully this is still working. Let's do a manual transmit. It didn't work straight away because I hadn't restarted xastir, so I stopped it and started it again, and now it works. So let's just have a quick look and see if I forgot to say anything. Oh yeah, there's one thing, the interface you have to bring up. So when I was looking at interfaces here, interface control, you can see this says up, means it's running. When you first add it, it's down, and you have to bring it up by clicking on it and clicking start, or just click start all to start all the interfaces in case you had more than one, and then it'll start. If it doesn't start, then there's a problem with the probably this little address here. Actually, this is where I typed it in wrong, and I typed Digirig instead of DigiRig, and it took me a while to spot because it's tiny and it was late at night. And so every tiny thing counts. Anyway, I think that's enough for this video. There will be more in the future. So I look forward to reading your comments and questions, and let's try and revive packet radio. It's gone a bit quiet over the decades, but apparently it's reviving, and I see a lot of mobile stations on 2 meters and 144.8 megahertz announcing their locations from their cars, especially in the summer when tourists are visiting. So it's quite nice to see, and there are BBSs around as well, so I'll be connecting to those at some point and maybe even running one. So thank you for listening. If you made it this far, remember to like, and if you want to see the next video, subscribe. You'll be notified, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.